Welcome to the She Will Shine podcast, where we bring you the real stories of female business owners. My name is Danielle Price and I'm the founder of She Will Shine, a supportive business network for women. It's time to give a voice to women in business and discover their journey.
Hi everyone and welcome to the She Will Shine podcast. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country on which we record this podcast, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and we recognise their continuing connection to the land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past and present. Now, the lady we have on this episode today, I have only met in the last probably 8 months, but I feel like I've known you forever, Shannon Dunn.
I know, isn't that such a beautiful thing when you connect with someone, you're like, where have you been all my life? Because I feel like I know you, but we haven't connected in person yet.
Exactly. There will be one big hug coming your way when that happens. Now, for the listeners that may not know Shannon just yet, Shannon Dunn has been coaching in the business and leadership space since 2006 at the Thrive Factor Co. Her greatest loves when it comes to coaching focuses on her clients activating their effortless success zone and turning their abundance of wisdom into thriving income streams, all while leading without unhealthy hustle. That's a bit of a mouthful, aka releasing the need to be busy and getting back to being in business. And she is also our much loved She Will Shine Western Australia ambassador and hosts all our wonderful events in Perth. It's such a pleasure to have a chat to you, Shannon. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Me too. And I always love these kind of things, Danielle, because it's like, what are we going to talk about? Like that excited anticipation of there's so many different kind of directions we could go, but like, what are we actually going to talk about?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the beauty of having just a conversation, right?
Yeah,
you never know where it's going to go.
Yeah, which is great. It's great. So where are we starting?
I'm going to ask you a question first. Did you ever think that you would run your own business, even as a young girl?
Yes. Yeah, 100%. So I now see, I didn't understand it obviously at the time in childhood, but I now see that I was kind of born to be a business owner. My dad went in and out of small business a few times and back to employment and that kind of thing because his parents had been small business owners. And while they'd retired from their kind of business when I was a child, all I heard was the stories about Nana and Pop's business. And, I think it was very much Pop's business in the conversation, but there was no doubt in my mind as a little one that Nana was the boss and Nana ran the whole thing, right?
I love it.
Charge, right? They had a corner store and, the family, my dad was number 2 or 5, the family lived upstairs and then they ran the corner store and everybody had kind of shifts to help out with Nana and Pop, and all the things that they were doing. And then my mum's side, my grandmother also was a serial business owner, like what we would call a serial entrepreneur, had a finger in many pies of lots of different businesses. Also, a lot of those in the retail space. I don't like retail very much in terms of coaching. So I think that probably cured me. But, as a young girl, I would go and stay with my grandmother who lives further south from Perth. And I would say to her, I want to come to work kind of thing. And I would work with her in her stores. And I remember pitching to her when I think I was probably about 8 or 9, like no more than that. And I've always been an avid painter, like an artist, and it was children's art, but like I was kind of proud of it. And I was like, can I sell it in your shop? And she's like, yeah, but you take care of everything. So I made signs and did all that. So I was marketing back then and not having any idea that's what I was doing. And I sold out all my pieces. So,
fantastic.
No surprise to me then that I became a business owner. And then also particular time I remember in my latter primary school into teen years when Dad was having different challenges in his businesses. There were 2 different businesses. And just, I guess as the eldest child in the family, I had some awareness of the stress that was going on and thinking this is not okay. And I remember, having conversations, my dad and I, he's passed now, but we were very close and used to have philosophical conversations about all kinds of things. And he would say it shouldn't be this hard. Like, I don't know what to do, but there was no people like me as a kind of business and leadership coach back then. He would read books. He went to night school, that kind of a thing in the 1980s we're talking, to learn about what to do. But there was very limited resources and very much you were on your own. It brought out creativity, but it was a real challenge. And so that I think planted the seed of, no, you're right. It doesn't need to be this hard. And one of the long-term taglines of my business is making business easier. So
yes, which I love. I absolutely love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I'm here to do, like as best as possible, to work with clients to make business easier.
What amazing role models. Like,
I know.
firstly, your grandmother, what a game changer
Two
and what a
grandmothers,
leader
both
she was.
grandmothers.
Both grandmothers, amazing.
And then having that, like, I didn't question about whether you could be a business owner as a woman, because I saw that when I was, under 10. I saw the lived examples of that, and heard about, you can be your own boss and you can do this and you can do that. So they weren't always great. What they told me and what they didn't always marry up, but they definitely instilled a sense of, yes, you can do whatever you want. You can be whatever you want and go for it. Like, use your intelligence, use your creativity, make your mark in the world.
And even with your dad, though, like, sort of trying to problem solve for him, and then ultimately your business problem solves for him today.
Totally. And it was interesting, even though, it's 6.5 years since he passed now. And I would say even up to the kind of 6 months before he passed, which I was 11, 12 years into my business at that point in time, he'd say, are you sure it's okay? Like, you're like, because that was his fear of and I know that there was points in time where he felt he'd let us as his family down because he had to go back to employment and have a job. Whereas, his whole love and desire was to actually be his own boss. That's just an interesting thing. So he still had that kind of, fear, and it was the voice of reason. And definitely when I had some, which I have often, kind of big, bold ideas that are way beyond his comfort zone, he would be, okay, now let's look at this realistically. So he was a good measure, and I still hear his voice in my head at times, but equally I hear my own going, let's just go for it.
You've got that logical thinker in your head there with your dad, but then you're like, no, I'm still a dreamer. I still can do it. And go for it. So where did your business owner journey start, Shannon? Because you've been in business for a long time now.
I have been in business a long time, and it started when I was still working in corporate. So my professional background prior to being in business, my very first career or qualification, I was a registered nurse. Long time ago. My mum was a nurse, so that kind of just made sense to me. But I've always had a fascination with human behavior and human interaction. So working with people was what I was always going to do. I think nursing was honestly, it was an easy way to get started, to actually have some kind of a qualification where I could work with people, because I really just wanted to travel. But I knew that, like, going away in my early 20s, which so many of us do from Australia, right? We go on that pilgrimage somewhere overseas for a period of time. I knew I didn't want to do bar work or be a barista. Like, there was nothing wrong with that, but I was like, no, I want a qualification before I go. I want to do something different. So I, trundled off to the UK with my nursing registration in hand, kind of thing, and spent nearly 5 years there. So that was amazing. Got to travel and work in different parts of the world, both volunteering and also nursing, and did additional qualifications over there. So I studied counselling over there and other things, and came back to Perth with a lot of what am I going to do now? Like, this is not enough for me. And within 12 months of being home, I had started studying I think it was a graduate diploma in business management, and focusing on marketing and small business management. And kept working in corporate. I was working in the corporate health space at that time, and then just made the most of all the opportunities to learn there. Operations management, quality management, all those kind of things that we don't think about in small business, but are actually really, really important. Communication strategy, training, and also that was my first introduction to coaching, because we had an executive coach come in for our leadership team, and that was more than 2 decades ago.
And was that like an aha moment?
Yeah. So sitting there, and I remember the incredible coach that we had. There was a bunch of us were kind of new to being in a leadership team together, frontline management kind of stuff. And everyone had very different, diverse backgrounds. Some had business experience, but not much. Most of them had come from nursing or clinical management backgrounds. But managing people, not necessarily our strong suit, as a group of people that were just together for the first time. And our boss at the time was like, that's all right, we'll just get my coach to come and work with you guys as a team, right? So we met this enigma of a man called Digby. Like, it was kind of this, he was almost like a movie star rolling in. He had this really unusual name that we kind of
love it. I even love his name.
It's very cool. Digby Scott. I'm still in contact with Digby. He lives in New Zealand now. He's from Perth, but his wife is a Kiwi, so he's been over there a long time. He's still coaching, and he came with and worked with us. So he had an organizational psychology background, which was how a lot of coaches coming into, or people coaching in the corporate or the business, kind of bigger business business space had org psych backgrounds. I didn't have coaching qualifications kind of back then. I said, this is probably 24, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And honestly, Danielle, I remember that very first session, the way, like just sitting there and immersing myself and listening to him, in paying attention to the way he was questioning us individually and as a group, to the way that he highlighted challenges that we had, opportunities for growth and change, just the way he kind of harmonized all of us, which we were a kind of a very direct, ambitious, sometimes outspoken group of 6 women. Yeah, not always easy to get on the same page together. And like, just, I was sitting there, I was like, what is this magical stuff he's doing? Like, what is this? And it was just, honestly, it was a moment of, this is what my future looks like. But at the same time, I was studying another qualification. I was doing my transpersonal art therapy qualifications, then did more business qualifications. So it took a while before I was like, you know what? I got to a point in the corporate career, I was like, I can't stay here. I cannot be an employee any longer. Love my role, love the seniority of it, love the influence I get with it. But it's not actually good for me from a health and wellbeing perspective. Yeah. And so there was this kind of time I'd been 10 years in that corporate role, or in that organization. So my seed money for my business was my long service leave payout.
Perfect. Yeah.
And that's where we started. So I'd actually started doing my business kind of on the side while I was still working in corporate and working, beyond full-time hours, really. I'd started doing things because I had my therapy qualifications, and I had first trained or did some internal training from a coaching perspective, and I was doing additional learning around actual coaching qualifications at that time. So I started working with clients back then in a more of a kind of a therapeutic, possibly life coaching way, but I knew that business was where we were going to go.
Like, it sounds like it was such a natural progression.
Yeah, it was.
Even with, the therapy clients you were taking on, that kind of thing, it all kind of evolved and amalgamated into this beautiful thing that you're doing now.
It did. It just, if I tried to script it, I wouldn't have been able to, right? But if you look back in hindsight, it's like, of course, it just kind of all flowed. And even way back, if I think about friends that I've had through all of this time, people that know me well, even some parts of my family, some of the parts don't kind of still get what I do, but people who really know me well and know what's really on my heart are like, yeah, of course you studied things like counseling and therapy and coaching. And of course you work with business owners. Like, it just, on the outside, it made sense to people. And it just kind of, it just happened. I'm very strategic and conscious and intentional about what I do, but at the same time, it's just continued to unfold. Like, it was kind of like a script that was written for me, and I'm just playing that out.
Because of that, were you worried about going into business, or did you kind of feel like we said, the natural progression?
I guess I'm sure, it's hard to remember. I know I did have some worries and fears. I was married at the time. I'm no longer in that relationship, but I remember, having to have a conversation with my husband at the time, and sort of, I was giving up quite a significant income to be into my own business, and trying to, he's not a business person. He's never going to be self-employed. That's just not the kind of the way his family works, the way he was brought up, very different to me. And he couldn't understand why you would want to give up security of an income and super and, leave being paid to you. And he just thought that was just a bit stupid, right? So that was probably my biggest hurdle. I wasn't fearful about that. It was like, how do I navigate this? And, get him to understand that it's not killing me. That was an extreme way, but that I could no longer continue doing what I was doing. And here I had amassed all these additional qualifications and experiences, and had this burning desire inside of me. Like, I had to do it differently. So, I did things like, I got myself a 2-day-a-week part-time job in kind of related to what I'd been doing in corporate, so that there was some income coming into, like, for my contribution to kind of our mortgage and all that kind of stuff. But I gave myself a mission, if you like. It's like, within 12 months, my business will have replaced this income and be able to cover its expenses, so I won't need this job. And at 11 months and 1 day, I resigned from that job.
Oh, wow. That's
like how, when I get my focus, I'm off. So it was just the fears of just navigating, different things that would come up. Like, it doesn't matter that I'd studied marketing from a bigger business and corporate sense doesn't teach you how to get clients when you're in small business or an entrepreneur, so it's like, how do I adapt the skills that I've got, and how do I actually, get clients? How do I get clear on what I'm actually even doing? Very much like, I think a lot of us, when we start, I can help anybody and everyone.
Yeah.
Of course, that doesn't work.
The doors are open. Come on in.
Doors are open. I've hung my sign out. I've put a website up. Like, where are you all? So there's lots of things. And I don't think there was a lot of fear driving that. It was more, I'm a very curious individual and I love to learn. And one of the other things I did with that very first, when I stepped out of corporate, and I had that, as I said, kind of like seed money to expand my business, was I hired my first coach. Business coach, and really took as much as I could. Like, I sucked that experience dry to take as much as I could in terms of learning and challenging, getting her to challenge me. It also helped me to expand my coaching skills by working with her as a client and seeing how she did things. So yeah, that was an incredible gift to be able to then move forward without letting the kind of obvious fears that come up. Doesn't mean that they haven't arisen on and off over the years.
Of course, yeah. But there was, like you said, there's so much, like, you can prepare for it, you can do all the study in the real, but there's still so much on the job,
right?
Training that you're only going to get on the job and experiencing it.
I can go and study, endlessly in the coaching space, which is an interesting thing and kind of a side conversation in many regards, because coaching is I know it's referred to as an unregulated, but it's also, the other way to look at it is a self-regulated industry. You don't require a qualification of any kind to call yourself a coach or be coaching, which that does not sit well with me. And I know that comes from my background in the kind of counseling and therapeutic space of understanding things like scope of practice and when to refer and duty of care and, safety and that kind of thing for individuals. Because just because we're working with someone's business mindset doesn't mean that there's not a whole lot of other things from their human aspect going on that you need to kind of be able to work with.
That's right, which we know goes hand in hand, like business mindset and just life mindset are intertwined.
They are. And when we're in small business or entrepreneurial, then I think the awareness of how intertwined they are is quite a shock for a lot of people, because something happens in our business, it will affect our life. Something happens in our life, it'll affect our business. You kind of can't separate the two like you can when you're an employee, and you can leave your job at 5 p.m. or whatever your finish time is and pretty much go home and not really think about it until you go back the next day. You've been in business a long time too now. You're on all the time.
That's
you're
right.
thinking about things, you're considering things. And I'm very good at being able to switch off, but it doesn't mean that I don't have some awareness in the background of, a conversation I may have had with a client yesterday where they were upset about something that was probably personal more than business. And, just that caring nature, because you are human.
And I think as well, with what you and I both do, and with a lot of other service-based businesses as well, you care so much about your clients and how they're, how their successes. And so, because you have that, it's not a transaction. It's a personal interest, and it's you're personally invested in helping someone to succeed in life or business or whatever it may be. And because of that, we're giving people, and we try and give as much as we can, but we do need to put those boundaries in place.
100%. And they need to be boundaries that are both in support of you and your client. So they've got to take both in interaction or into consideration. And I would suggest, though, that you prioritize boundaries for yourself. So if I look at things like a few years ago, in fact, kind of coming out of the initial phase into pandemic, right, 3 years ago now, I was like, you know what, the way that I've been doing business is no longer working for me. I was working at the time with different kinds of clients than I am now. I've kind of now where I'm at, gone back to the clients that are really on my heart that I've always worked with. But at the time, because of different networking I've done, you and I have had conversations about kind of other kinds of networking, I was working with a different client group, and there was a lot of men in business I was working with, which I no longer work with men in business. And a lot of them were in trades. So here I was getting up really early, which I'm an early bird, but that's not the best thing to do, is to go and use that earliness and be at my office, which I had back then, and, doing a client session at 7 a.m. because that works better for them. No, whose is actually better here? Because by the time it got to mid-afternoon, my brain was kind of fried. And yet there was clients that still wanted to work later into the afternoon. So that was not good. So I was like, no, wait a second, let's reframe. How do I put boundaries in place so I can be the very best version of me to show up for my clients?
And as well, being in business isn't the easy option, in my opinion. Going out and getting a job, it can be a lot easier. Like you said, you switch off at 5 o'clock and you don't think about it again till 9 o'clock when you walk through the door. But being in business is hard. So it's kind of like, what can I do to make it easier on myself and what works for me? Like, I don't have to answer to someone else. I can create this business to make sure it works for me.
Such an important thing to recognize and to actually really embody. And I think like the hundreds of conversations I've had with clients over the years who are complaining about some situational experience that they're having with one or more clients. And when we look at the realities of it, it's come down to the business model that they have and the lack of boundaries. And people are like, my phone rings at, ridiculous times of day and night. It's like, well, it's your choice about whether you answer it or not. Put a message on your phone that says that you're available or you'll get back to them at X time or after X time the next day. If they're ringing you at 10 o'clock at night, don't answer your phone, things like that. It's not that hard. But again, when we're in business, and often a lot of people are driven by a fear of, if I don't answer the phone or answer an email or do something when a client asks me at whatever time of the day or night or day of the week that is, that they'll either lose that client or they won't get any more.
Yeah, they're driven by fear.
Yeah, definitely. And a scarcity, no, that's not the way to look at it at all.
So, you've been talking about how your business has evolved in that regard, Shannon. How else do you think it's evolved over the years?
I think that one of the biggest pieces of evolution for me was recognizing, yes, my love and gift for coaching, but also teaching. And I know you and I have talked about this a little bit, but I had created an archetype framework, a self-leadership framework for women. 2009, so it's 14 years old this year. And so that's been the cornerstone of my business for all of that time. And in discovering that, I recognize that I have gone through my own assessment process with that. I have 4 archetypes of a possible 12. One of those archetypes is the mentor teacher. So I'm in a space in my business where I teach a lot. So yes, I coach. Coaching and teaching are not the same thing. Teaching can come into coaching, but a lot of my business programs that I run for women in business are a teaching experience, a business education more than they are coaching. There's coaching element in there. So living out who I am and honoring who I am as a mentor teacher is one of my 4 archetypes is just second nature. But that was a huge evolution for me. And that enabled me many years ago from working really one-on-one with clients to adapting or evolving into a one-to-many model. So that also increased profitability, did a lot of other really cool things, gave me an opportunity to actually design and create courses that maybe run live or, self-paced kind of things, and really look at, well, what content have I got? What kind of gaps may I have out there? And what are my ideal clients? What are they actually looking for and what do they need? So I could put together things that work, for them. And I've gone from the big kind of lengthy signature programs. These days, my business model is more shorter programs. So I kind of run a live program every month, have some self-paced things. And in addition, then the massive extra evolution was recognizing that framework that I created, the self-leadership framework of archetypes called the Thrive Factor, was actually something I could teach to other business women. So that they could use it in their businesses. So 2019, 4 years ago, I launched that as a certification program. Back then, again, I wasn't consciously holding myself back, but I didn't realize the enormity of it. I really didn't. So back then it was a certification just on how to profile your clients using the archetypes and a little bit about how to coach with the archetypes. It now is something that's grown into, it's not bigger than Ben-Hur, but it feels like it sometimes. It is now an actual self-leadership coaching certification where you get certified and then licensed as a Thrive Factor coach. And it's just like unbelievable. I feel like this is my legacy to leave in the world, is this framework and all of the gifts that it offers to women, no matter where they are in the world. I predominantly use it from a business perspective because I have had that long-term background in leadership and business, but I have, coaches in my community that work in the healing space and the mindset space and the money space. So it's adaptable. As long as your clientele predominantly are or completely are female-centric, then it's a framework that you could use in your business.
I just love, Shannon, because you went through the process, that self-awareness, kind of like you said, you discovered what archetype you were, the 4 archetypes that you were. And it's I think that self-awareness is so important as a business owner, and going into business, we don't realize that. We kind of go into business for a need, it might be a need for flexibility or out of frustration or out of a dream or a passion that we want to see fulfilled and out into the world to help others in the same situation. But we don't think about the actual self-development journey that we're going to go on
No.
when we do that.
I remember in the early phases of being in business, and I was attending a regular, it was like a monthly kind of catch up, a little bit of networking, but it was led by a business coach that was based in Perth at the time. And she kind of did like a monthly workshop on something to business. And I vividly remember her kind of standing on the stage and saying, being in business will be the biggest personal development journey you've ever been on. And I was like, okay, I kind of get that, but really? And then, kind of onslaught, it all hit. And I've, been a personal development junkie my whole life. So I kind of felt like I had some personal understanding, again, having that fascination in relation to human behavior and human interaction, studying psychology, studying therapy, nerding out on Carl Jung's work, particularly around archetypes from my teenage years. I kind of had some good background. I'm so grateful for that in every single aspect of what I do now, that I've had those other pieces to bring to my experience in the way that I work with clients from a coaching perspective. But I continually, to this day, am investing in self-awareness. And in fact, the Thrive Factor framework is a self-awareness, self-understanding, self-leadership framework. And it really is about when you get to meet yourself through the lens of your Thrive Factor archetypes, it's giving you insight into your personal psychology. So we look at it through the lens of the strengths of the archetypes and the potential challenges, because the strengths can mitigate the challenges, and the different archetypes that you may have, you could have anywhere between 3 and 6 of a possible 12 in your Thrive Factor profile. The different archetypes you have can kind of cancel out some of the potential challenges so they don't become actualized. So it really depends on what your archetypes are. But with knowing my own archetypes and being committed to practicing what I teach, so living them in, expressing them, being them every single day, puts me in a position, as it does for anyone who gets to know their archetypes, where I don't question who I am. And how often in business do we second guess ourselves? Do we wonder what we should
all the time?
Do we go, oh my goodness, I need to be doing this because that looks like the latest trend in my industry? All of that kind of stuff. I don't even have to even think about that. I'm in my own lane. I'm confident and clear about who I am. And if I keep investing in being me, the rest of all that nonsense, which I think it is a lot of the time, just falls away. So
100%.
I look at, I've mentioned the mentor teacher archetype. She's the archetype of wisdom and knowledge. The most important thing is to trust and to use my wisdom more than my knowledge. So my learned experience more than my lived experience more than my learned experience. But she's here to teach others. She's here to be a guide for other people so that they can learn things and do something with that learning. So that just is inherent in every single aspect of my business.
Yeah.
Inspire a believer is another archetype that I have. The inspire a believer is the cheerleader archetype. She sees the good in others, sees the potential in people. She has an incredible belief system that really drives her, and an infectious, excitable energy that people just love. So she's present in every single coaching session I have, and every piece of teaching that I do. The inspire a believer shows up. I always say she's kind of got her metaphorical pom-poms ready to go. Like
ready to go, yeah.
Yep. Here she
and
is.
The choreographed dance routine.
If you call it like, what's one of the trends that you see a lot of younger women are talking about, being like a hype girl, that kind of thing. That's inspirable energy, right? But it's natural for me to do that. I literally see and sense the potential in other people. So it's no question for me about cheering them on to do something that they want to do. Yeah. And that's also is amplified, the gifts of that archetype, by my visionary creator archetype. Visionary creator of the 12 is the rarest archetype I've seen show up in the profiling that I've done of over 1,000 women in business. It probably under 30 visionary creators that I've met in the world. I didn't recognize that was going to be as rare as it was until I started profiling and getting evidence to show that. And taken me a long time to actually, I guess, lean into the gifts of that archetype. The visionary aspect of it means that I have a really clear sense of what's possible in the future. The challenge with that is that I get incredibly frustrated, because if I can see it and I can sense it and I know it's possible, why can't it happen now?
Impatience of it.
Totally. And one of the shadow aspects of the visionary creator is impatience. And when you're impatient, you lack trust in being able to hold that vision and see that vision. But one of the other things about that archetype that is incredibly valuable for business is that she has an innate sense of strategy. So she's very strategic in the way that she does things. And the strategy is all about using the creator of the visionary creator so that you're consciously working towards bringing that vision to life. So I teach my clients how to do that for themselves. They don't need to be a visionary creator to do that. But it's a natural gift that I have because of that archetype. So I can use that to create strategies, and that's that making business easier thing. The last one. So I see the liberator engineer. She's a freedom weaver of the archetypes. She's also the rebel. Yeah, it's kind of like I was talking to one of the Thrive Factor coaches yesterday who also has this archetype, and we were kind of having a laugh about the fact that someone says to us to do something one way, we're going to go, nope, I'm going this way, just on principle, right? It's the rebel archetype. But she does it in a very quiet kind of a way. It's an archetype that's very capable. So she picks up things very quickly. She's very analytical, able to create systems, processes, frameworks. I created my own framework, right? So this is where the liberator engineer comes in. But for the liberator engineer, if she does not have freedom woven into every single thing she does in her life and her business, nothing will flow for her at all. So that's why I call her the freedom weaver.
I love how these tools, Shannon, and that, you're able to help your clients with these tools, because as women, we often don't give ourselves the permission to be ourselves. We can embrace these tools and we can accept who we are, which in turn gives us the courage, and people will say confidence, but I'll say courage, to pursue what it is that we want to achieve.
Yeah, completely. And permission has been a word that has come up a lot, like the number of times I've sat across from an incredible woman, at a table or virtually, and introduce her to her archetypes. And there's often a flood of different kinds of emotions that will come through. And often then that's followed by various phrases along the lines of, I actually like myself. Like, I'm looking at me here, or, oh, that's why I've done that all my life, or that's why I've been interested in that, or that's why I want to do that in my business or my career or my life, or, oh, now I get why, like those kind of things. And I also then have had a lot of women say to me, I feel like I have permission now to be me.
Yeah.
It's such a gift, honestly. And equally, I think it's important to highlight that from this perspective, from the Thrive Factor framework and using the archetypes to introduce a woman to herself, it's a reliable, now proven framework that's been out there in the world a long time, but it's founded in psychology. It's not, so many women also say, like, I've done so many of these kind of things. This is the only one that's actually looked like a reflection of who I know I am and who I want to be. But it's not a definitive, this is all you are framework. It's this is who you are in this moment, and it's like a springboard to who you could be. I only know, yes, I've been defining the archetypes for 14 years, but I learn new things about them, all 12 of them, all the time. Every time I'm doing some kind of a coaching session with a client and we're referencing her archetypes, I have the potential to learn something new. I think the mentor teacher is very is a good archetype for me to have, because I expect to learn things all the time. So I'm constantly evolving what I know and what I understand about the archetypes. And then the added benefit of having now the coach community, they're bringing their feedback into what their experiences are,
100%. And that's the thing, going back to being a business owner, you can't stay as you are. Like, you might experience things and learn things, but if you don't do anything with that experience and that learning, you don't evolve.
No, that's it.
And your business doesn't evolve with you.
No. And when we are stagnant, it can be one of the most frustrating places to find ourselves in. And when we've created that stagnation ourselves, I think a lot of people don't recognize that they can change things. If I look or understand or to share about the principles underpinning or the pieces of self-leadership, I've defined self-leadership as it's the result, like the lived experience of the choices you make and the action you take.
Yeah.
And that just honoring and being in that space puts you in a space of also self-responsibility. And you're no longer kind of a victim. I'm not really a big fan of that word, but you're no longer kind of defined by your circumstances. You're like, you know what, this is the reality I'm living through or I'm experiencing or where I'm at right now, but I can change that. And I often will say to people in all kind of contexts, we are individually the biggest influencer in our world, but you got to recognize that and own it. And then when you have, though, a reliable framework, like something like the Thrive Factor or whatever other people resonate with, you've got a place like a compass to come back to. So when I have moments of anchoring, but it's not anchoring you down and holding you back. It's gathering you to your innate potential is what we refer to it as. And when you know who you are and you are consciously and intentionally using your archetypal strengths, that's where you unlock your effortless success zone. That's another phrase I talk about a lot in my world. Things just get easier.
Yeah.
You're not sitting there going, oh, why does this keep happening? You're like, oh, I see that. That's this shadow influence of this archetype that keeps coming up. But I know that if I use this strength of this other archetype, that no longer is a challenge for me. So you're just like, empowered moving forward.
So Shannon, how many years have you been in business now?
This is my 18th year.
18th year. Wow.
Mm.
And like, you know, obviously, you know, you've evolved the business exponentially, especially with your Thrive Factor archetypes. But also, you know, you've changed, you know, personal circumstances have changed for you over that time.
Yeah.
How do you think, you know, obviously I think these archetypes would have helped you immensely during that journey.
So much. Yeah.
But how do you think kind of like, how is that process? I don't know if defined is the right word, but how has that kind of helped you for the future?
I think all of the things that I have experienced have given me a sense of and a knowing of resilience. Yeah, I'm kind of been aware that I have a strong character most of my life. You know, I was told when I was at school, I was relatively quiet because I'm a big observer, but like at the same time, a kind of chatterbox in the classroom. So I was told that I was kind of like, you need to kind of curtail your personality. And again, you know, if I look at my archetypes, the visionary creator archetype that I have, one of my nieces has this. So it's been an interesting thing. She's 16, talking with her about why school isn't her favorite place, because it kind of, we're in that visionary aspect is futuristic thinking. So what the kids were talking about at school, I was so bored, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't realize at the time, I didn't know what that was, but that was, you know, I wasn't a naughty kid, because I also have a need, which is often a mentor teacher thing, to be the good student. So it was kind of a contradictory thing. And then I've got the rebel of the liberator engineer going, yeah, you just taught me how to do it that way, and I have to follow that process, but I know that I can actually do it faster.
I've got a better way.
Right. So maths classes for 3 years, I had the same teacher through year 8, 9, and 10, my first 3 years of high school back then. And he was so frustrated because I would get to the right answer. But, you know, I don't know if you remember this, but back then, and I'm sure it's the same now, you had to show you're working out. And their working out had to follow the process that you were taught. Well, my working out never followed their process, but I got the right answer. And I used to drive him mental, because he would mark me down because I didn't follow the exact process that I'd been taught at school. And I would argue back that, but I got the right answer. There's more than one way to get to the result.
I struggle with this. I'm the opposite, Shannon, because I'm like, okay, give me an example of what needs to be done for a maths problem, and then I'm right to work it out. Or I just need an example.
Different archetype that you have that is
exactly. But like my son comes home from school and he's like, oh, we're using this strategy today, but maybe next week we'll use this strategy. I'm like, how many strategies is there? Just tell me one way to do it and I'll do it.
Like if I think about something I often talk about with clients, and, you know, I've shared this a little bit on the podcast, my own podcast, is that there's no one way to achieve the success you desire. Just like there is, like for every single individual out there in the world, we all have our own definition of success. We all have our own definition of what it means to thrive. Like, know what yours are, know, you know, where that goes. But, you know, it's that, as I said, I knew that I had a strong character. I know that, and I've been encouraged all my life, I think it drives my mum insane still sometimes, to have my own opinions and to think for myself. And, you know, there was definitely times in my life where I would be encouraged to use, my family used to say, use your smarts. Like, you know, you've got a brain, like use it for whatever advantage or whatever you can. Think about it, like think through things. So I'm grateful for the role models that I had, definitely. And for over the years, I have found myself in different situations where I've often had friends or connections in, whether it's been work or in personal life, that have been a lot older than me, who've really been wise guides. And also it's been a real great thing, because as I said, it's not that I don't like people my own age, I do, but when I was younger, the kind of conversations that I wanted to have, kids weren't having. It was kind of like, so I didn't kind of fit in that normal social construct of being a teenager at all. And my niece is, you know, my niece Mia is much the same. So again, having the Thrive Factor archetypes, having profiled her and being able to say to her, this is why you feel like this. This is why this isn't kind of working for you right now. But you've kind of also got to go through the process, because this is the way the world works. At the other side, you know, this is all the possibility and potentiality for you. But but for me, definitely everything in my life has been a sense of resilience. The challenges, the frustrations, the personal stuff that's gone on, you know, it's just built kind of layers of, and given me an opportunity to affirm yet again who I am.
I love that so much, Shannon. And I love how I guess, you know, when we connected and we were so much on the same page in that, you know, not only do you need to kind of have the support of, knowing who you are, but you also need to have the support of people around you.
Community.
And leaning into that community.
Yeah, so important. And I'm not one for massive communities. You and I talked about that in terms of that big networking kind of event, and it's just like, can't even be bothered with that kind of thing. But when you can have that opportunity to have a smaller, intimate space and really get to know people, it's so nourishing. And now we've had a few events over here in WA for She Will Shine, seeing the same women coming back, seeing new women come along, hearing them talk about, oh, this was so different to what I've done before, and I feel good, and we had really great conversation, and I want to connect beyond this kind of meetup. That is just so nourishing for me. And as I said to you when we first connected, which is through mutual connections, a member of yours in Victoria. In fact, then I kind of started to see how many people I knew in Victoria, particularly because I know that's the biggest in terms of membership for state-wise across Australia. How many of them were connected to She Will Shine? It's like, of course. But just kind of reaching
the good
out,
ones, all the good ones.
and going, you know what? I don't want to start a networking thing. I don't need to do that. I don't have time to do that. But what else is out there that is aligned values-wise to me, to where I could maybe be as I became the ambassador over here in the West? And I love that. I remember saying to you when we first had our first catch up, I'm like, have you thought about branching into Western Australia? And you were like, yeah, sometime, like at some point, in time, can we do it now?
And then it kind of just happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I think for me personally, like on a personal note, the East Coast I'm familiar with, like that's kind of my jam. But the West Coast, I was like, oh yeah, I've visited there a couple of times, but I don't really know that many people. I've got a cousin there, but I don't really know much about the people. And it's just been so fulfilling, because it's like you build something, right? If you build it, they will come. Okay, well, we all know it takes a bit more than that.
Yes, it does.
But seeing it replicated, like, when the values are there, and when it all comes from such a good place of positivity and support and community, like that true sense of community, when you have those values and when you see that replicated. I haven't even visited you guys in Perth yet, and you're just amazing. Yet, let's get underline yet.
Yes.
But seeing that come to life somewhere else, it's like, oh my gosh, wow.
It's very cool. And and I do sit in a position of feeling very honored that you've trusted me to kind of be the face for Western Australia. Because we are a long way away, and it's not uncommon for people on the east coast of Australia to kind of think of us as a whole nother country. Like, from where I am, I can fly to parts of Asia faster than I can get to the other side of Australia.
Exactly.
So, things like that. You guys can get to New Zealand and Fiji and all those kind of places quicker than you can get to Perth. So, it's no surprise that we feel like that there is a huge divide, because there is a massive big kind of space in the middle of Australia.
That's right.
Some stuff in it, but not a lot. While we really are not that much different, it can feel, I imagine, from your position, like it's literally a world away. Navigating. It's been fun navigating time zones and like reminding.
Oh my gosh, that's a whole nother ball day.
You're like, we're doing this lunch catch up. It's like, you're 12 o'clock and our summer is 9 a.m. So it can work, but like, don't call it a lunch catch up anymore, because that's right.
And we've had those conversations.
It's not going to entice West Australian people who often have had experiences over their entire lives, if they've been here a long time or from here, of the East Coast, kind of going, we're doing like, what is it, Friday afternoon drinks, and we're like, but that's kind of 2 p.m.
Good morning.
Right. So and kind of feeling like people didn't acknowledge that. It's a bit like when quirky things like when you see people in the Northern Hemisphere only referencing the seasons in the Northern Hemisphere. And there's a little part of me that goes, wait a second, there's a whole other half of the world underneath, like, and our
doing something else. That's right.
Those kind of things, right? Yeah. So some people over here in the West can definitely be a little bit defensive of that. No one cares about us. And I just,
we care.
in the corporate space where people would kind of fly in from Sydney and Melbourne and you know, the bigger cities in Australia and kind of go, oh, this is just like a country town. It's like, no, we got a big city here. And it's like, yes, it's far away from everything.
Yeah, it's a beautiful city too. Well, I think it's worked for the better, in all honesty. Like the time zone thing, the things that we were doing in the morning, we now do over lunch, which works out for you guys and works good for us. So we're finding our way through it.
Of course we are.
Yeah. And it's such a pleasure. Like even, I've chatted to our new members over there as well. And just the feedback I'm getting from them with you, it's just a beautiful thing. And I'm so proud of what we've created together in a way.
Yes, we should tell everyone who's listening, we have a big goal over here to have lots of growth with our membership in on the West Coast and to really make our mark with She Will Shine over here. So if you're listening and if you're here, obviously come to one of our events. But if you're not, and you know someone who's over here and they are a woman in business or maybe a leadership role, they're looking for a great community, tell them about She Will Shine.
100%. Come along, try us out. Now, Shannon, just before we finish up, I wanted to ask you one more question.
Yes.
Over your business owner journey,
the
many years, what are you most proud of?
Oh, what am I most proud of? Like there's 1,000 things like rushing to my mind about all the cool things that I have done and experienced. But you know what? I think the reality is that as a coach, that I'm still here at, 18 years in. Coaching, while it's a no barrier to low barrier entry, doesn't necessarily have a long tenure. Coaches often come in, they kind of like, yeah, here I am, and they're gone again within probably.
Come and go.
So the fact that 18 years in business coaching, that is something I'm incredibly proud of. I'm so proud to be a coach, to be a qualified coach. I'm a big advocate for a lot of things to do with that. I speak out about it more than I ever thought that I would. And because I want there to be a rigor and professionalism in this industry, because it has such an incredible place in the world in terms of its connection to supporting individuals and groups. So I think that's probably it. And people say to me, oh, what's your kind of key point of difference? And at times the cheeky part of my libretto engineer has gone, well, I've been in business a long time. But
but it's true.
It is true. It is now, and mind you, those first few years felt like I was going to take forever to get anywhere. And all of a sudden I was like, oh yeah, here we are in our 18th year.
Amazing. That's definitely something to be proud of. Yeah. Well done on 18 years and here's to many more.
Yeah, exactly. Someone said to me the other day, a friend of mine who's an employee, when are you going to retire? I went, I don't know what that word means. Like I can myself, teaching and maybe speaking on stages and, hosting retreats as long as I physically and mentally can. Like I can't see that stopping. It may change over time, but, I don't want to work forever, but it's not work. Like I love it so much. And it's such an integral part of who I am in the world that, and I said, this is my legacy. Yeah.
100%. Thank you so much, Shannon, for sharing
Thank you for
a piece of you with all of us.
Yes.
We're really appreciative of it.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much for having me and for starting She Will Shine. Like what a gift it's been to so many women. So it's such a great thing to be a part of.
Thanks, Shannon. And thank you to everyone for joining us for today's episode with Shannon Dunn. And we look forward to speaking to you again next time. See you soon.
Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode of the She Will Shine podcast, we invite you to check out shewillshine.com.au. She Will Shine is the essential support network you need to grow a thriving, meaningful business. We can help you grow your network, connect and develop genuine relationships, be supported and support others in building and growing a successful business on your terms. Say goodbye to working alone and become a member at shewillshine.com.au.